Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. This episode is a previous recording of our live Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer series, where a live audience asks questions of professional Scrum trainers. We hope you enjoy this episode. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are located today. Welcome to today's Ask a PST session. I'm Lindsay Ballasina from Scrum.org, and today I have Rahman, and he is going to field all of your questions today about Agile leadership and any Scrum questions that you have as well. So let's get started. And just a little bit about Scrum.org. We were founded by Ken Schwaber, one of the co-creators of Scrum, back in 2009. Our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. And we do that through professional Scrum training, certification, and also ongoing learning experiences. And this webinar is just one of those free ongoing learning experiences that we offer. So please be sure to check out all of that on our website. We always want you to continue your learning beyond the classroom. And with that, I'd like to kick this off to Jay, one of our professional Scrum trainers, and he can introduce himself and kind of set the stage here for the Q&A, and we'll get rolling with questions.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. So my name is Jay. I'm a PST and founder of Fractal Systems. We're an Agile consultancy that was born out of the frustration of witnessing the many failings of Agile implementations and transformations that have gone wrong. Our goal is to help firms build true Agile capability that really works and really delivers. So we're not just trainers, but we're active practitioners that work with firms across product, leadership, and engineering. Oh, and we've put together a 5-minute scorecard that helps folks see where they are with their Agile delivery and if needed, how they can improve it. There's a link on the screen there, so please do check that out and do let me know how you think, how it goes for you. Super happy to be here and answer some of your more pressing questions. Lindsay, over to you.
All right, fantastic. So I am going to stop sharing.
Okay.
If it lets me. There we go. All right, and let's kick this off with a pretty basic question to kind of set the stage here. So what is an Agile leader?
That's a great question, Lindsay. So we see Agile leadership as the art and science of creating an environment where teams and organizations thrive. Agile leaders build close collaboration and are focused on rapid organizational and team learning. I think they also focused on consistent, valuable delivery. So actually having the organization or their teams realize the firm's mission goals. I think Agile leadership is, the easiest way to see it is it's usually distinguished by approaches like decentralized command, intent-based leadership, decentralized execution, and servant leadership. So you've seen all those sorts of key phrases when it comes to leadership.
Great. So that kind of sets the stage. Please have your questions, keep them coming in to the Q&A, please. That would be great. This question, so only things that bring value to the customer count to the velocity. Can you create estimated user stories for, say, maintenance tasks?
Sorry, say that again. So
this question from Demetrio says, only things that bring value to the customer count toward velocity. Can you create estimated user stories for, say, maintenance tasks? So this is more of a developer type of question.
So I wouldn't worry so much. Velocity primarily is a great tool for planning. So when it comes to figuring out what your team is able to deliver in a particular sprint, it's a great historical measure for that. So, but I wouldn't worry so much about velocity. I'd think about, what is the work that we need to be focusing on to get to done? So how do we release valuable increments? And if there's work or additional work, which isn't maybe a visible piece of work that a customer will see, but it's necessary for delivery. By all means, include that in your estimation. Hope that helps.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so what's one common mistake that Agile leaders make that you see, Jay?
So there's actually a few. I think when it comes to high pressure sort of Agile programs and delivery, strategic delivery, sometimes what I see happening, what we tend to see happening, is that Agile leaders don't account for the learning curve. So if you've got an organization of, say, 1,000+ developers, even 500 or even 30 developers, they've never done this before. They've got hard targets or important strategic targets that they need to hit. The leadership team don't think about, what is it actually going to take for our guys to learn how to do this well? What mistakes are they going to make? How do we figure out backsliding? How are we going to manage challenges around, how the teams are going to interact and relate and learn? All of those sorts of things tend not to be accounted for. They just assume that, oh, this is the target. We're going to go Agile, twice as much work, half the time, and we're just going to nail it. So just looking at the realities and thinking about what the teams need to do to shift towards that new way of working,
right,
is an important task.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this question says, we have more than one sprint goal. Sorry, reality hits. And I am really struggling to transform the daily Scrum from a status check to check it toward the sprint goal. People really tend to report out. Any hints? Thanks.
So the most important thing about the daily, so it's the daily Scrum, the question was asking about, Lindsay.
Yes, it's asking about the daily Scrum.
Yeah. Okay.
And
cool.
kind of shifting from a status check toward really checking the progress toward the sprint goal.
The way to think about, thank you for that. The way to think about the daily Scrum is it's really a risk management event. So, providing a status doesn't really, may or may not be helpful towards managing that risk. But if you approach it as, well, this is the tactical risk management that we're doing on a day-to-day basis to achieve our sprint goal, then what's going to affect the delivery of the sprint goal is what's going to come up, what's going to bubble up, and that will bring your daily Scrum to life. And we've done that with, we've done that with many teams, but most importantly with managers and leadership teams, because leadership teams don't want to come along to a daily Scrum that is just a status check. What they're there to do is to manage risk around the delivery. So if you think about it from that perspective, that might change the way you interact and way your teams interact in the daily Scrum.
Right. That's good advice. Daily Scrum is not a status meeting. So this next question. So the Scrum guide doesn't mention managers. Do managers have a place in the Scrum team?
So do managers have a place in the Scrum team? That's a good question. The way I would look at that is that our managers helping the Scrum team deliver the goals. If they are, then they've got a place. It doesn't really matter what your role is, or, what your official role is. But if you're part of the team, you're helping deliver, you're making that move forward, then yes, absolutely. Managers in and of themselves have an important place in organizations. Their goals are to help teams eliminate friction. So any challenges that a team may be having to delivery, like just from mundane things like the skills aren't there or technical things are needed, managers are there to eliminate those frictions to help that team really move forward. They're not there to beat teams up, okay? And that's a really important distinction. You're not there to whip the teams and to make them work,
Right.
18 hours a day. That's not what a manager's role is. The manager's role is to eliminate friction. Their role in the Scrum team is there specifically to help them achieve the goal. So if you're there to help the team achieve the goal, that's great.
Okay, great advice. Thank you.
Sure.
So this is a common question that we get just in general. So how do you explain the difference between Scrum and Agile in terms of how you process your work? So it's always an interesting question since Scrum is an Agile framework. So if you want to explain that.
Sure. So Agile is like an umbrella term for various frameworks or that can fit within it. So you have things like DSDM, Kanban, all of these sorts of things are forms of agility. Scrum is a specific framework that has its own sorts of rules, guidelines. So that's the way to do it. It's really a subset of Agile. That's the way I would look at it.
Yep. Definitely.
It's a bit like saying, can you explain mathematics and geometry? Mathematics is the umbrella term.
Right.
Geometry, yeah, it's just the, I'm sure I've nailed that now, right?
Yep. Okay, perfect. So a leadership focused question here. Should leadership
Sure.
be attending the daily Scrum? Does that impact psychological safety when they do?
So first of all, I think leaders don't necessarily need to attend the daily Scrum. If they want to listen in, I don't see any problem with that. We've had our leadership teams coming along. If the Scrum Master believes, however, that psychological safety will be impacted or teams are afraid, then I would discourage it. It's good to speak truth to power diplomatically and perhaps explain to leadership teams that, hey, having you here scares people and we need to figure out a way to make it safe for them. Let's work on it together. Let's be transparent and work on it together. That's what we need to do. It's all about that collaboration piece, right?
Right.
Most teams aren't used to having leadership teams turn up. But if you're doing it right, having a leader turn up makes no difference whatsoever. Teams should be okay to talk about what's going on, what's really happening, and be transparent in their approach. It shouldn't make a difference. That's the ideal.
Right. When it comes to leadership itself, is that something that can be taught? Or is that something that is just innate and it's there? And
yeah,
what's your take on that?
That's that nurture versus nature question. We have seen great leadership has been taught. I mean, most people don't wake up one day and become great leaders. The idea is that you need to learn a specific set of skills, practices, mindset, and you have to drill those behaviors until they become secondary and natural. The other thing is you kind of need to be able to deploy the right behavior in the right context. And that all takes practice and training and time. So we always encourage, and when we work with leaders, we make sure that they're trained so they have good understanding of what the knowledge is. There's mentoring that happens and that needs to happen. And that helps leaders operate in real time. So when they're working with challenges and stuff, a mentor will help them figure out what is the right way forward and execute the behavior that they need to be doing. And then finally, there's the coaching piece where a leader has a necessary skill set. They know what they need to do, and they kind of need a coach to help them really kind of finesse it. But those three approaches absolutely help leaders develop, and they develop well.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
For those of you who are here in our live audience, just a quick PSA. If you're entering questions into the chat, can you please move those questions over into the Q&A so that we document them? That would be great. Thank you. Okay, so this next question here, so it comes from Isha. I am new to Scrum, but I will be moving to a Scrum Master role soon. I understand that the estimation should be done by developers, given the fact that they have the expertise to decide how to get the work done. However, is it recommended that the product owner should be available and present when the estimations are run by the developers?
So there's a number of, so I would recommend that product owners around when developers are doing that kind of thing. Primarily that it's going to happen in two places. Either you're doing it in refinement, so not necessarily an event, but definitely something which needs to happen. We found that refinement is absolutely critical for product owners to explain to developers and to engineers and to the team on what it is that we're trying to build and why. And in kind of assumptions behind it and what good looks like and all that kind of stuff. So developers can estimate around that point as well. And I think the thing is that estimating with a product owner in place does two things. First of all, it ensures that the engineering team or development team really understand, developers really understand what it is they're building. And most importantly, the product owner also begins to understand what it takes to build some stuff. So I always recommend that when you're doing things like that, make sure the product owner is present.
Yep, that's good advice there. So when organization culture is very traditional, and this has in parentheses a no mistake policy,
A no mistake policy.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And the top management is immediately result oriented. How can the Scrum team deal with that?
So the thing is that
Immediate result oriented. I mean,
immediate result oriented. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
So
They want it right away.
Yeah, 100%. I understand that. So we work in financial services. We do a lot of work with financial services and fintechs and all that kind of stuff, and that culture is prevalent, right?
Right.
A no mistake policy is okay. It's not a tell the future policy, right? So we speak to senior managers and say, if I came along and I gave you a plan with no contingency in budget or time, what would you say to me? I've never had anyone say, oh, that's great, let's do that. I've always had somebody come back and say, look, you can't tell the future. Where is your contingency planning? Where is all of that stuff? Okay. So we can use that approach. So when you're speaking to management teams and when you're thinking about building out goal, Scrum teams, managers, project managers, no one knows how to tell the future. And that's the lovely thing about Scrum and agility. We start with that foundational piece of knowledge, and we accept that from the beginning, from the get-go. So whenever we're kind of thinking about building stuff, it's really important that when we do estimation or when we're talking to leadership teams about what it takes to deliver something, we're talking about a roadmap, that we don't talk in absolutes. Most importantly, we found an approach that works for us is that we talk in terms of probability. So we'll say, hey, this is the roadmap. We think we're going to deliver, this widget by June, and the probability of us doing that is around 75-80%. So there's a 20% wiggle room, right? And what we're actually communicating is that there's a risk there that we're not going to deliver, right? We're putting, because we can't tell the future. And leadership teams, good leadership teams, understand that. They understand that risk management is part of the game. So when you're doing that, you can then figure out and you can find ways for the team to communicate some variance in the actual delivery, and that there's going to be a bit of a fudge factor, and that's okay.
Great, thank you. These questions are very broad and kind of all over the map.
Yeah, we're all over the shop.
That's great, though. Thank you all for bringing your questions here. This is a great place to bring them. So how do you get developers to volunteer to pick up work themselves instead of imposing work on them?
I'm an ex-developer, so and it's not just developers. No one wants to be told do this or do that, right? So I think the thing is that a great approach is to talk about it in the retro. So you have a retrospective and you say, hey guys, how do we want to work together? So 9 times out of 10, if you have the luxury of starting a team and you're right at the beginning, you can figure out and you can build up a team charter. So what are the values? How are we going to interact? What are we going to do about work we don't want to, no one wants to do? How are we going to do that? What is the way that we're going to work together to deal with those sorts of things? And guys, do we really want to be the kind of team that, the manager says, hey, you're going to do this and he's going to do that? Is that how we're going to play the game? Or would we rather work as a unit and try and figure out, okay, some days I'm going to pick up the great stuff, some days I'm going to pick up the other stuff, and we're going to work together to get the goal done. Ultimately, if we deliver as a team, if the team wins, we all win, right? So that's right. Where I'd have that conversation in the retrospective. It's the best place for it.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Yep, that's what retros are for. So next question here from Chandra. How do we measure the maturity of a Scrum team, and what should a Scrum Master do to improve it?
How do we measure the maturity of a Scrum team? So
big question.
That is a big question. There's a couple of things that you can do. The most important thing is to figure out, what does mature mean for you? I tend to find that teams that are brand new to Scrum, they really don't understand the practices. They don't understand the framework. They don't understand why. Why are we doing retros? Why are we doing daily Scrums? What does that actually mean? And we talked earlier on about risk management as being a fundamental tenet for the daily Scrum. So we were working with an asset manager in Zurich. We had the COO as part of that team, that leadership Scrum team. And we had to explain to him why we would have him turn up to a retrospective. So he's saying to me, look, Jay, I'm managing, I'm the COO for the bank. Why do you need me here? And the question was, well, look, the answer was, well, look, it's the risk management exercise. How is your leadership team performing? How are you going to help them? Do you understand why that's important? Can you see why that's important? He was like, well, if it's risk management, I'm going to be there. So those sorts of things are fundamental things, right? So when a team is at that fundamental level, you want to be making sure that they understand why they're doing Scrum, why they're doing Agile, why the events are important, why are the roles and responsibilities and the accountabilities, why are they there? They really should understand why. Okay. When teams move from that kind of basic view, so they understand the framework, they're executing it well, and we start to think about things like definitions of done. Are we releasing value? Are we picking up work automatically? When challenges come along, do we wait for the Scrum Master to turn up? So when I was working, I was working with a brand new team in a financial firm, and I came in one day as a Scrum Master. I came in one day, we had a desk move. I come in and no one has moved. What had happened? The developers were sitting around going, oh, we were waiting for you, Jay. Why are we waiting for me? Well, we lost the desk move plan. Right. So no one decided to go and ask anyone what the plan was, or you just waited for the Scrum Master to turn up, right? Yeah. And that was a brand new team. They hadn't thought about self-organizing or self-healing or fixing their own problems. They were like, we're just going to wait for the Scrum Master to rock up and tell us what to do. So that's a new team, right? A more self-organizing team will be thinking about, okay, we don't need the Scrum Master to sort this out. We can figure this out ourselves. And you'll start to see them self-organizing, fixing problems, fixing challenges themselves. 9 times out of 10, and if you're doing it right, when a team is really cooking with gas, challenges will come and disappear and problems will be eliminated, and the Scrum Master won't even know about it. It will just happen because the team will be self-organized. And they kind of work on that kind of continuum. The most important thing for a Scrum Master to do is to be consistently observing how the team is doing and how they're dealing with challenges and problems, as well as how they're executing the framework. Are they doing it well? Are we getting delivery out the door? Are we working with the product owner well? Do we understand what it is we're building? How is our predictability? How do we deal with challenges? Those are the kind of things that a Scrum Master should be doing, observing and intervening when they need to.
Right.
I was trying to make that really small.
Yeah.
It's a big question.
Yeah, that's great though. And I hope that answers your questions, Chandra. And if you have anything follow on for that, please be sure to drop that in the Q&A here. So this next question, so I think this could be an opportunity for you, Jay, to kind of think about a story on your side that you can share. Maybe you can kind of tie in the leadership perspective here as well.
Sure.
But are there specific steps that we can implement to be a successful Scrum team?
Are there specific steps that we can implement to be a successful Scrum team?
Yep.
It's a great question. I think the most important thing is to really understand, just actually as part of Chandra's question earlier on, the most important thing you can do is really understand why you're doing Agile. What is it that you're trying to achieve with agility, right? And then how does Scrum fit in part of that? Get good, really, really good at working out how to do Scrum well. What tends to happen then is that the team will get really great at fixing local problems. Team-based problems will get fixed really, really fast because you're great at it. Then what will happen is the team will start to butt up against the organized leadership layer, right? The management layer, the upper leadership layer. And that's where the team can begin to influence leaders and help them figure out what they need to do to help support you as a team and how to move you forward. We were working with a great story for this actually is we were working with a quant team a couple of years back, just before COVID actually, and we were helping that team. There was about 50 guys and girls, really smart people, PhDs, absolute like legitimate rocket scientists. These guys were the most educated, smartest, brightest guys and girls on the planet, and they were managing a lot of money. And so what we found was we had to help these guys and girls, these teams, coordinate well, deliver value, deliver product well, most importantly, manage the funds that they were managing, do that well, and keep risk down. What happened was when those teams started to manage and fix all of their local problems, all the interrelationships and all those sorts of things, they would have other challenges that they couldn't resolve. And so the managers need to step in. Now, in financial firms, managers tend to be quite command and control. And so we had to help these guys learn a different way of helping their teams. Instead of carrot and stick, it's more about what are the frictions that you're dealing with that I can help you eliminate. leaders have a massive, massive responsibility. And they're also under a massive amount of stress and pressure, right? So they don't always have the time to fix everything. The lovely thing about Scrum is that reduces their time. It reduces their management time because the teams will only come to you when they've got a challenge. What these guys were doing is that they were finding ways then to, instead of telling teams what to do, was to assisting and supporting teams in eliminating the frictions that they were facing. So they would just get quicker and quicker and faster and faster. And some of the great things that came out of that was that the teams pretty much doubled their productivity, so that any kind of goals that they had to achieve, they achieved them quicker. Most importantly, their decision cycles went down. So when you're managing, say, 25 billion, right, and you really need to think through how long things take. It would take sometimes 3 to 6 months for them to come up with a decision. We got that down to days and weeks, just because the teams were operating better, communicating better, and all those sorts of things.
That's great. That's great advice. Yeah, it's always good to hear an actual story to kind of explain it in motion.
You know, the thing is, leaders love agility, because if they look at it as a management approach and a risk management approach, it just brings down their overhead. So instead of having to, chase teams and figure out where they are and, who do I need to, go after, and, where is the work, and they don't need to do any of that stuff. What they need to do is help teams become self-healing, self-organizing, self-improving. That's where they need to focus their time, such that when there is a challenge, you won't need to go up and chase the team. The team will be chasing you. They'll be saying, hey, hey, Lindsay, you're running 3 teams here. Can you help us overcome this impediment? And when you do that, you become a force multiplier. You start to unlock not just 5 people or 10 people, but 50 and 100 people, because you're gonna be dealing with common challenges that the teams are really crying out for support for. So your role as a manager, the time overhead just comes right down.
That makes sense. Okay, so this next question here. If you're working as a Scrum Master across 3 teams, which events should you aim to join?
Wow. So you're so if you're working as a Scrum Master across 3 teams, the first thing is that, hey, well done, right? That's a lot. So there's obviously, that's like 3 times the work and hopefully 3 times the pay. Someone's really trying to maximize their value there. What I would recommend is, first of all, the first question is, are you serving those teams well? Are they 3 teams that are cooking with gas? And I know you didn't ask that question, but it's really important to know about it, right? Because if you've got 3 teams that are just flying, and they don't need that much support, then cool, no problem. I would attend the events that are pretty much managed. You don't need to attend the daily scrums if the teams don't need you there. Obviously, the other events, you're pretty much there, so be there for those. But my first question to you would be, are you serving your teams well by managing all 3 teams? As Scrum Masters, our role is to train, mentor, develop, coach our teams, right? So if they're struggling, or if they're at various points of struggling, our time commitment is going to be much more. Those teams won't be doing planning very well. They won't be estimating well. They won't be learning well, right? And our time commitment in that space will be expanded. So that's probably the first question. Is that happening? If the teams are cooking with gas and they're just absolutely flying, then drop the daily scrum if they don't need you there, but certainly be available for the other events.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
And this next question here. So we're using Scrum to deliver learning and development initiatives rather than traditional software development. What's your advice for writing user stories and/or a definition of done for non-software projects?
So so Scrum can be, we've used Scrum in building startups and helping marketing teams and audit teams and all that kind of stuff. The most important thing for you to figure out is the definition of done is probably the easiest thing. So I don't know very much about your context, so I'm going to be talking in principles. How do you know something is done? What's the list that we all need to agree upon? So if it's learning and development, is it that learning objectives need to be there, that the trainers need to be set up? Is there a schedule that needs to happen? What do we need to do to actually get to done, to deploy that training? Do we need to have people set up? Do we need to have managers approved? Is that is that all part of the fix? Is that all part of the game? Sorry. So that idea of, what is the checklist? I would start with that as a candidate definition of done and continue to improve it, right? So every couple of weeks, you're going to retrospect. Is this a good definition of done? Do we capture everything? Did we drop the ball somewhere? If so, how can we fix it? How can we plug the gap? Can we do something with our definition of done to ensure that we don't drop the ball next time? So that's how I'd probably play with it. The most important thing is to start with something. It doesn't have to be great. Just start with something and improve as you go. Okay.
Yep.
That was a two-parter, but I think I covered both parts.
Yeah. And if you need to dig more into that, please feel free to add that back into the Q&A as well. So there are a number of questions here around estimations. So I'm going to try to tie some of these things together. So there's a question here of how to find out or understand if developers are estimating the story points fairly. And there's also a few questions here about just best advice for estimation planning in general, and what do you recommend?
Okay, cool. All right. So
Like
let's
techniques
do
and things like that.
Yeah.
There are quite a few questions here in that vein.
Sure. Okay. Should we do the second one first about how to estimate well? We'll do the fairly one later. But let's do that. How do you estimate well? The most important thing about estimation is to ensure that the developers agree on what small looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that you're using story points, or you can use hours, you can use day. It doesn't really estimation. It doesn't really matter what you're using. Okay. So if you're using, say, for example, we're trying to build a piece of code. What we want to be able to figure out is what is the smallest piece of code? What does that look like? Why don't we call that a 1? Human beings generally are great at figuring out size of things. They're not so great at figuring out exactly to the minute how long something is going to take, right? But they kind of know the bigness of stuff, right?
Yes.
So figuring out what the smallness of something is. So how a great thing is, what's the smallest dog you know? Oh, it's a Chihuahua. Great. So what's the biggest dog you know? It's a Great Dane. Okay, so how many Chihuahuas fit in a Great Dane? 10, 15. You're gonna get some kind of, hey, there's gonna be 15 Chihuahuas in a Great Dane, right? Or 20 Chihuahuas in a Great Dane. So there's a big dog and a teeny dog. So, and people are going to generally agree around what that takes. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for general agreement. Okay. So when you're looking at software, I'm assuming this is a software question, right? So when you're looking at software, then you want to think about, okay, what is the smallest piece of work that we think we can do and the team agrees on is the smallest piece of work. Let's call that a 1 hour, 1 day, whatever. All right. We're talking, to make it easy, let's just say it's 1 point. Okay, cool. What's the biggest piece of work? Well, it's this. This is what we did last time, and it took us, I don't know, it took us 15 points, we're going to say, right? Okay, so now we know what 1 is, and we know what 15 is. So what's the middle? 7 points. Great, we're going to use 7 points. What was that? Is there a piece of work that looks like that? Yeah, it's this. So now we have 3 reference points. So now with those reference points, when we're then considering other pieces of work that the team is doing, right, we can figure out where those pieces of works based on our estimates, where that fits on the continuum. Okay.
Right.
By the way, this is why points or estimations in one team does not translate over to another team, because each team is doing different things. They have a different context, right? So if you're building web pages, for example, your big may be 15 points and your small may be 1 point, but it's to do with web pages. Your context is all to web pages. If you're building data, data backend servers or whatever, or you're implementing infrastructure, your 1 point and your 15 points or your 18 points, whatever Fibonacci sequence you're using, is going to apply to your particular context. You can't then compare teams because it's not apples to apples, right? So that's a great way of doing it. And then the thing is, the teams can get practice just by going through the dog exercise. It's such a great exercise, and it's so fast. You can use chimps, monkeys. You can even get really wild with it and go, okay, well, how many Great Danes fit inside an elephant? All right. And people will come back with answers and ideas, and the team will generally agree. Why? Because teams are good and people are good at figuring out sizes of stuff and bigness of things and smallness of things. Okay, so that's that question. Hopefully that will be that's clear. If not, come back to me and I'll try and be clearer. What was the second one?
So
about fairness.
This other one, yes. So how to find out and understand if the developers are estimating the story points fairly. So it's a little ambiguous.
So the word fairly seems to imply this is more of a trust thing.
Yes,
rather
definitely.
than, yeah, this is like, do I trust my development team? Do I trust my developers? Are they inflating the work so they can relax and go to the gym for 15 hours a day? Those are the kind of questions. When I hear that word fairly, those are the kind of things which kind of come to my mind. The most important thing I think in that space is that if you have trust issues, and that's a different kind of conversation, right? We need to be thinking about, hey, have we hired the right person? Do they understand our values? Is the company values? Do they understand that? Do they understand transparency and openness and honesty? Are they all about that? If they are, great. Then we need to have a conversation about, hey, how are you estimating? What is it that you're thinking about? Okay. If it's about just making sure that the guys have considered everything, then ask for help, ask for support, right? So let's imagine that a team are building a product that they have no idea about. Got no idea. They've never built it before. They don't know anything. They're a brand new team. And they're coming up with wild estimates. Then bring some help in, bring some architects in, some engineers in, bring in some guys with some experiments, and so bring in some guys with some experience. Those people will help you figure out and help you work through your estimation. The other thing you can do is that refinement sessions are there to help you think ahead. So you know the potential product backlog, or the stories that are going to be coming in the future sprints. So refinement doesn't necessarily have to be just about the story. You can run. I ask technical teams to run technical refinement. So if you don't know what something is, you can work together as a technical team and go, okay, we're going to build this widget. We've never done it before. What does it take? And then you, as a team, break down the actual thing that you're trying to build, figure out the detail together as a unit and as a group. And that will familiarize you with what's coming, the technologies involved, where the holes are, where the gaps are. And so your estimates will be a little bit closer to what is achievable. I hope that helps.
That's good advice there. Thank you. Yeah, trust is super, super important.
Yeah. I'm hoping it's the second, that it's just a brand new team. And
yep. It seems like there's quite a few brand new teams in the audience today based on the caliber of questions, for sure. So here's a kind of a fun personal question. So can you share one thing about Scrum or Agile that you yourself were surprised to learn about?
One thing, that's a great,
put me on the spot.
That's a great question. That I was surprised to learn about. I think I can tell you something. I'm not sure about surprise, but I think the thing I love about it is the principle that we don't know the future. I kind of got into agility as a developer, and then for my sins kind of got great at that, became a team lead, became a project manager. And when I was project managing, the thing which kind of really bothered me was that I've got to predict the future, and I can't even figure out what I'm doing next week, right? I've got to tell these guys, I've got to tell the leadership team that we're going to deliver this really kind of expensive product, like multi-million-pound product, with 30 guys and girls working across this, and I've got to give you a date when it's going to happen. And my engineers don't know, and my leaders don't know, and I don't know. But the most refreshing thing about agility, I think, and about Scrum is that it's okay not to know, right? It's all right not to. In fact, if you tell people things if you give people absolutes and certainties, good leaders, experienced leaders, even if they're not good leaders, but they're tough leaders, they will tell you that if you don't put in some kind of uncertainty, you don't own up to the truth that you don't know the future, all of your plans are written in sand, right? It's all going to fall to bits. So that's the thing I love the most about agility.
Yeah,
I hope that helps.
So this next question. So as a Scrum Master, how does one help the team to slice the stories? Are there any specific tips or techniques that you would recommend for the Scrum Master to help the team with slicing stories into smaller pieces?
Sure. Look, I always find that so slicing stories primarily, I always find my view is that if you're a technical Scrum Master and you've got a coding background, that really helps because you can really kind of get into the nitty gritty and the detail of it all. Ideally, though, what I would always say is look, think through what is the smallest piece of work we need to do to actually deliver some value, across, we don't want to be focusing primarily on like back end stuff, or you don't want to be focusing on just small components. What you want to be doing is you want to be thinking about what can we do to release value, and what is the smallest amount of things that we can do to release value. That's where I'd be thinking. That's where I'd be starting. Slicing stories can be challenging, specifically, well, especially when the context is quite complex and there's a lot of moving parts. You've got a UX, you've got backend, you've got all these when you've got all that happening, then the idea is, what is the minimum we can do to get value out? That's where I would start. The temptation becomes, oh, let's just do the UX today, and let's just do the back end next sprint, and then maybe we'll do the test. And then suddenly you're now building all these different components and stuff, building out waste and technical debt and all these sorts of things that don't work together, right? So the key is try to keep the whole thing moving, try to go end to end, and try to think of the smallest stuff that you can do and build on that. That's hard. It's a hard question to answer because I don't understand your context, but hopefully that will be enough in terms of principles for you to go after it.
Yeah, and feel free to add more follow-up questions if you need there as well.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a fun question. There's a lot of Scrum Master focused questions in here today.
That's cool.
So
I love Scrum Masters.
What do you do on your first day as a Scrum Master?
So let's assume, it's a great question. It's a good question as well.
Maybe paint a scenario here.
All right, cool. So there's a couple of contexts where we can be a day one Scrum Master. Are we a day one Scrum Master ourselves day one? Like it's the first time we're ever doing it? Or are we an experienced Scrum Master, new team, all that? I think the most important thing is to first figure out, hopefully you'll have another Scrum Master that you're taking over from, right? And if that's the case, then the most important thing in that case is to begin to shadow them and see how they're operating and start to learn about the team. Figure out the context, the work that's being done. Understand what is it we're building? Why are we building it? Talk to the product owners. Try and really understand what the team is about and what they're trying to do. Really understand that. The next thing I would do is, once you've figured out the work, is try and figure out the personalities involved. Where is the team in their level of maturity and their ability to get product out the door and get delivery out the door? Now I'm using the word product, but Scrum teams operate in all kinds of environments. Audit, marketing, we've mentioned. We talked about trade management and stuff like that. We talked about and software, right? So it's all about getting value out the door. So how is that team in getting value out the door? What are their main challenges and problems and frustrations? What is preventing the team from doing all the great stuff that they're there to do? I always find that great Scrum Masters add value by fixing or helping the team eliminate impediments. So whenever I'm in there, I'm trying to figure out, whenever I've started a new team, once I've understood what it is they're trying to build, the personalities involved and the challenges that they're facing, I try and work hard to try and eliminate some value. Try and eliminate some of the frictions and create value. Not eliminate value. If you do that, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so here is a question about retrospective. So someone asked to recommend any interactive or fun tools to hold retrospectives, but in that same vein, just recommendations for a more engaging retrospective.
So there's loads of tools out there, depending on if you're, right. I mean, there's Miro, there's all this stuff, right? You just Google it and you get a ton up there. So I'm not going to go into the actual tools themselves. Fun retros. What we would do is when I have a team, so I'm going to give you a secret here, right? So I hope you're ready for this. So whenever we have a new team doing retros, the one thing I would always do, and I was kind of, I wouldn't say famous for, but certainly known for, was the Krispy Kreme retro. Okay, so why was it called the Krispy Kreme retro? Because the most important thing about retrospective is to help teams relax and to think about how things have gone over the last sprint. All right. You want to do what you can to, I would always bring Krispy Kremes. So whenever I'm bringing Krispy Kremes, for those of you that you are not, you have Krispy Kremes up there in the States, right? It's not just a UK thing.
Oh yeah, we have Krispy Kremes.
Cool. The Krispy Kremes are like the king of donuts as far as
they gotta be hot.
100%. I'm all in there. So when I was, so what I would do is I bring Krispy Kreme and coffee, and what that does is the most important thing that kind of does is it helps development teams, the Scrum teams, think about the event and the conversation differently. most meetings are quite focused, okay? And the retrospective is also quite focused, but the mindset has to be different. It has to be more exploratory. It must be more inward thinking. Just bringing in some coffee and bringing in some food helps people relax a little bit and to be a bit more introspective.
Right.
Now in India, we were bringing in samosas and things like that, and mithai and barfi and all these things. But here in the UK and in the States, it was all about the donuts, man. But we've run retros in coffee houses and different spaces, in gardens. Those are just changing where you are makes a huge difference, and helps the team kind of relax a little bit and think and just kind of open themselves up to thinking about how they're doing. You want it to be that the team is open to introspection, and this is not a blame situation. This is about, hey, we did great here, we smashed it here, and because of that reason, Krispy Kremes. We didn't do so well here, we could have done a bit better there, and what can we do? Maybe we could try this, maybe we can try that, and come up with some experiments that we can rock and roll with in the next sprint to actually get better.
That's really good advice.
It's all about the donuts.
So the next question here. So this goes back to estimation just a tiny bit. I know I spent a lot of time on that topic, but is refinement and estimation the same meaning or two different ones? So when should the team be doing their estimation? Right.
Okay, cool. So look, when you have a refinement set, so estimation we believe, I've used it in two spaces, right? You can, when you've got a great refinement session happening and teams really understand what it is they're building, and all the various components and all that kind of stuff, 9 times out of 10, when the team really understands, they can estimate right there and then. They can say, hey, this is the thing that we're trying to build, and there's nothing stopping them from running an estimate in refinement. They can also do it in planning, right? So they can leave the estimation, they can go off and they understand the work. When they're in planning, they're talking about it a bit more, they're sizing things up, and at that point they can start to estimate. I tend to find that when refinements are running really well, the team is pretty much ready to estimate, and they'll just knock it out there and then. So I try to get, my view is try and get all the estimation done in refinement. If you do that, right, your planning is 20 minutes. It's like, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this. These are the stories. This is the sprint goal. This is what we're going to. So this is where we're heading forward in terms of the product goal. The team figures out the sprint goal. This is what we're going to do. These are the different stories. The estimates are already there. Do we all agree with them? Yeah, we do. Any changes? Nope. Let's rock and roll. Let's go. And the planning becomes really slick.
That makes sense. So we're going to tiptoe back to retrospectives again quickly, because we have a few questions that popped up. So you talked mostly about retros in the in-person sense. So what recommendations for a more engaging retro when you have a remote team or a hybrid team?
Yeah, so I tend to find, so hybrid teams are, I'll take the more difficult. Hybrid teams can be a little bit more difficult because when you have a bunch of guys and girls that are in the room, they're getting a different kind of experience to the people that are on camera, for example, right? So and what I found is that the team members that are on camera or on the phone tend to miss a lot of the detail that the organic conversation, that retrospective creates. So my view is, it's not necessarily right or wrong, but my view is that try and do either or. Mixing it doesn't tend to go so well. If, however, you can keep the context going, and you can have people like on a Miro board or something like that, and they're putting all their stuff up on there, and they're disciplined around the phone, cool. But then you might as well all be online, right? If you're doing a fully online retrospective, then what's important is again agreeing your ways of working. And we've all been there where someone's doing a retro and the team's there and everyone's camera's off. And what's really going on is that they're trying to get their work done. And it happens, right? Life happens. People are trying to get their work done. They're trying to listen in with one ear while they're trying to get something out the door. They're trying to take care of their kids, or the dog needs feeding or something like that. So my view is that when you're doing a retro, try to do as much as you can to keep the team engaged. And if that means cameras on, then cool. If your camera is off, then that means that you're not present, and that's okay. All right. The way you're going to figure that out is through your team charters, through your team agreements. Yeah. By speaking to each other and figuring out, hey guys, how are we going to retro online? What are we going to do? What is it that we agreed to doing? None of us wants to be the police. Okay. So none of us wants to say, hey, Jay's got his camera off, he's a bad guy. What we want to say is let's make it easy for Jay to be present. If his camera's on and his mic is on, that means he's here with us. And if the camera's off or the mic is off, that means Jay's dealing with something important and he'll be right back as soon as he can. Okay. So those sorts of things, I'm not saying that's right or wrong. What I'm saying is that those sorts of agreements help the team operate as one.
That's good advice there. Yeah. And thank you, audience, for asking those follow-up questions about the remote side of things. That's definitely super important. So thank you for bringing that up. So this question here shifts gears a little bit. So what is the difference between the product goal and the sprint goal? And if you can give examples of each, that would be great.
So the way I see it is that the product goal is the overarching, what are we heading towards? What is it we're trying to do, right? The sprint goal is more of a tactical. So product goals are more like strategic, so they're more further out. Sprint goals are tactical. What are we going to try and do this sprint? So I think someone mentioned earlier on about was it technical debt or widgets that are not necessarily value giving to the customer, but they're necessary for the delivery to be done. So those are the kind of things that would potentially factor into the sprint goal, and the developers themselves will figure that out. So hopefully that helps.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
This question from Megan here. I'm a Scrum Master, and each sprint planning event, we craft the sprint goals together. We do a confidence vote on how likely we feel we can reach these goals. And the last 2 to 3 times, all the goals have been reached. Do we then need story points if we're sizing relatively? Or are they good the way they're working?
So the team is they're planning, and did you say reached or breached?
Reached.
Oh, so they're hitting all of their goals.
They are.
And they're asking if they need story points.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what value if you guys have figured out the size of work that there's actually a movement out there, and I think that you don't even need story points, right? There's no estimation movement out there. And we teach the same thing. If you can get your stories which are sized around the same, so let's imagine every story is around the same size. It's just about counting stories, right? Or counting PBIs. So we know, hey, we can do 10. We can do 10 PBIs, and what's the confidence there? 95%. And we hit it every time. We know that we can knock out 10 PBIs. Why would you need to do points and this and that and the third? So if it's working, then, if it ain't broke, right, don't fix it. There's nothing to fix. You guys are cooking with gas. Keep going. Do more. Well done. Right.
I think that question came in when we had all those floods of questions about estimations and things like that. That probably popped into Megan's head. So thank you for asking that, Megan. Here's a question about product ownership, and this might be our last question, not sure. So my Scrum team has more than one product owner adding items into the product backlog. How can the Scrum Master facilitate the crafting of the sprint goal with multiple product owners? So maybe talk about product ownership in general and that type of thing.
I think that problem is indicative. You got a symptom right there of why there is only one product owner. Because of that very reason. What should be happening is that you should have one product owner who is working with the various stakeholders or other people interested in what it is that's being delivered, and figuring out what are they going to build, why are they going to build it, the order, the priority, and all those great things, and order the product backlog. That's the idea. So you have one source of truth, so to speak, in terms of what it is we're going to go for. When you have multiple product owners, multiple products. I mean, I've seen scenarios where a Scrum team, their product backlog is just a cage of stuff, right? And people are just throwing things in there because they think it's just a wish list, and there's no relevancy, there's no coordination, nothing. So the 1 minute the team are working on one thing, then they're working on something else, and the team just is completely inefficient and ineffective, and everything just gets built in a terrible way. So the purpose of a product owner is to release value. And most importantly, you need one product owner so that the team knows which way they're heading, right? So what I would do is I would first of all make that transparent. The product owners probably don't know that that's what's happening. So have a conversation with them saying, look, guys, I see there's 3 of you here or 2 of you here doing this stuff. And the effect of it is this is the effect this is having on the team. This is the data. This is what's happening with the team. We have no idea what it is we're doing. So 1 minute we're doing this, next minute we're doing that. And also, I bet they're probably reordering the product backlog as they go. So now you've got all this kind of real-time stuff happening. And I've seen it happen where product owners then start to interfere in the sprint backlog too. So like, wait a minute, my story is super important. I need it done yesterday. That story that Bob's looking at, that he put in, that's not that important. So let me just take that out and I'll throw something else in. And next thing you know, the sprint backlog's all over the shop as well. So the most important thing is to make transparent the challenges that the team is facing by that approach, and then have the product owners figure out who really is going to be the product owner for that team.
Right.
And how are they going to negotiate the work and all that kind of good stuff, right? That's part of the game when it comes to being a product owner.
That makes
I hope that helps.
sense. Yeah, thank you, Jay.
Sure.
So we are, I don't think we have time really for any more questions.
Okay.
However, we have a lot of open ones here. So audience, rest assured your questions will be addressed. I'm going to be sharing the question list with Jay. And if you had provided your contact info, you will be getting an answer from Jay. So I will share those with Jay after the event. And we can also figure out a way to answer the anonymous questions as well. So we will figure that out. So thank you all so much. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that if you wanted to connect me on LinkedIn, reach out on LinkedIn. If it's something super pressing and super burning, come and find me on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy. I love helping people prosper with agility. Come and find me on LinkedIn. It's Jay Rahman, and we can go from there. And maybe we do a podcast on just those questions, Lindsay.
Yeah, we could definitely look at doing that. So as we close up here, we always encourage you to continue your learning. So please check out the learning paths on Scrum.org, and also connect with us and the Scrum.org community through our blogs and our podcast series, and also our webinar series like you're here with today, and all of the other free resources on our website, including our forums, another great place for you to ask your questions. And again, this is how you can connect with Jay. So please do so. And we hope everybody got value out of the session. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to all of our questions, but we got through 28 of them. So rapid fire. So thank you all for attending, and please keep an eye out for other Ask a PST sessions in the near future, as well as our Scrum Pulse webcast series. We have a webcast coming up next week focused around value with 2 of our colleagues from McKinsey. So please feel free to check that out, and have a great day and Scrum on. And thank you again, Jay, for fielding these questions today.
No worries. I look forward to doing it again.
Have a great day, everybody, or a great evening. Bye.